We begin with the very latest on the war between Israel and Hamas. Israel's Prime Minister is attempting to answer international appeals to do more to limit deaths among civilians in Gaza. Those calls are growing increasingly loud this week as the world sees more scenes like this one. Video into us from Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. It shows wounded civilians after what Palestinian officials say was an Israeli airstrike. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is among world leaders urging Israel to do everything it can to protect civilians. Netanyahu admits in an interview with CBS News that Israel has not been successful, but he also blames Hamas.
First of all, any civilian death is a tragedy. And that we shouldn't have any, because we're doing everything we can to get the civilians out of harm's way. I can say is that we'll try to finish that job with minimal civilian casualties. That's what we're trying to do, minimal civilian casualties. But unfortunately, we're not successful.
The Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry provides the number of dead and wounded in Gaza. It has not been able to provide daily updates this week, it says, because of communications issues. But officials did release new numbers yesterday. The latest, 11,470 people killed in Gaza, 4,707 of them children. This hour, Ellen Morrow leads off our coverage, beginning with what Netanyahu is saying now about the Israeli military raid on Al-Shifa Hospital.
That operation is ongoing. The IDF says troops are still there searching the Al-Shifa hospital compound. And in this interview with CBS News, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended the operation, saying the IDF has uncovered evidence related to the hostages and that troops found what the IDF describes as an operational tunnel shaft at Al-Shifa. Remember, Israel had accused Hamas of operating a headquarters in tunnels underneath Al-Shifa. Now, we can't verify any of these claims independently, but here's what Benjamin Netanyahu told CBS News.
We're trying to do the moral thing, the right thing, to deprive Hamas of having this safe zone in a hospital. And so far, we've achieved it. I'm glad to say that we've been able to do that. We talked to the hospital administration. We told them we're coming in. Make sure that no one is there, no one is hurt.
And we're also hearing from the director of Al-Shifa Hospital, how they're talking about the humanitarian situation at that hospital. It's believed there are still hundreds of patients who've been inside as the operation has been ongoing there, including the newborn babies who we've spoken so much about in recent days. The director of the hospital saying that it's a struggle for patients there, that they need water, that there's no oxygen there. Talks have reportedly been ongoing to try to evacuate them, but it's really clear what's going to happen at this point as the operation continues. There is pressure on hospitals throughout Gaza City, as there has been for now. The Palestine Red Crescent Society has reported heavy fighting in the area. Hospital also in Gaza City, and a doctor at that hospital gave an interview. He's now evacuated with his team because they weren't able to actually perform any more operations there. But here's what he said.
We left, there were over 500 wounded needing urgent medical care, but needing surgical intervention that we could not provide because we'd run out of medication. The operating room could no longer function. It's been a living nightmare, leaving 500 wounded, knowing that there's nothing left for you to be able to do for them. It's just the most heartbreaking thing I've ever had to do.
So you can hear there the stress in his voice, Heather, about the situation in Al-Ahli. Aid organizations say that most of the hospitals in Gaza are under a huge amount of pressure, even the ones in the south, because of no fuel getting in to help power those life-saving equipment.
Ellen, we've been hearing from UN agencies for weeks now about the deepening humanitarian crisis in southern Gaza, and this morning we're getting fresh aid warnings. So what do we know about what is happening in the south?
Well, there's a few things going on. As you mentioned, residents in the area of Khan Yunis, in 4 towns near Khan Yunis, have received leaflets that were dropped by Israeli planes telling them that they need to move. Now, these are people who, many of them, who left the north when they were told to move from the north. They went to the south where the military said it would be safer, and now they're being asked, a lot of them, to move again. The question is, where do they go? Because shelters in the south are already over overrun, and that's fueling a lot of fears for those people that the ground offensive will expand into the south as well. We're also hearing from UN aid agencies. You'll recall earlier this week there was some fuel that did get in, about 23,000 liters to be used in UN trucks. UNRWA, the largest UN aid agency in Gaza, says that fuel has now run out, that it can't distribute aid, and there's no timeline for when more will be brought in. Another dire warning is coming from the World Food Program, Heather, saying that civilians in Gaza face the risk of immediate starvation if more aid doesn't get through.
That is Ellen Morrow outside the Old City in Jerusalem.